Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Temple Podcast. This is your host, Holly Wheeler, and I am so excited today to be dropping in and sharing this episode with you that has been brewing on my heart for a year now, and I finally feel ready to share it with you. And my hope, desire, and prayer is that everything that I'm about to share with you in today's episode will inspire you to feel yourself as a woman a little bit differently, will inspire you to cherish and treasure your Eros and your sexuality as a woman, and to open your eyes to perhaps new ways of dating and relating as you prepare yourself for union. So today's episode 84, is called Why I'm Saving My Sex for Union. Why I'm saving my sex for union. And throughout the journey of this episode, I'm going to share with you some stories. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. And this is really the deepest reason of why I do this podcast, is to create deep relational intimacy between you and I, so that you can feel me and know me so much deeper than what I share of myself online and in my master classes. The podcast is really a conversation, a dialogue where I open the temple doors and lift the curtains and really bring you deeply into my intimate world, into my discoveries, my revelations, my mistakes, everything that I'm learning. And so that something may be inspired in you, so that you may see part of you in my journey of transformation. And then I'm going to go into sharing with you sort of where I've been on this path with my journey around sexuality, the transformation that I've been through over the last year, and where I am today. So let's take a deep breath together, ladies, and let's begin. So the reason I'm recording this podcast today is because I've been a busy bee behind the scenes, getting ready to launch and start and begin our new group program called Erotic Innocence. The doors close on the 11th of April at the end of this week, and we begin next week. And Erotic Innocence is an 8-week group program for women that are preparing themselves for union and are specifically in the remembrance and reclamation of their preciousness as a woman, and restoring and redeeming their relationship to their sexuality, to their eros, to their pleasure, to their bodies as a woman, while they prepare themselves for union. And essentially, this program that I'm hosting and guiding women on for the next 8 weeks is essentially the program that I created for myself over the last year, through trial and error, through mistakes, through lessons, through practices and prompts. It's essentially the program that I guided myself and coached myself and mentored myself along this journey. And now I've created this program to guide you along this journey, to shorten the time so it doesn't take you a year to make these changes in how you relate to your sexuality as you prepare for union, but can actually condense and compress your journey to just a short few weeks. So that's what inspired me to create this podcast episode today. And I'm actually going to be hosting a masterclass tomorrow, Tuesday, April 8th, called Erotic Wealth. This is a free masterclass. It's a pop-up masterclass that I'm hosting, which is all about how you as a woman can reclaim your sexual energy and become really rich and fertile in your eros, in your soils as a woman, as you prepare yourself for union. So that masterclass is tomorrow if you're able to join us live. And if not, you can sign up below to receive the replay at any point in time. So I have my Erotic Wealth Masterclass, which is like a amuse bouche. It's like a little teaser, a little taster of the full ride of Erotic Innocence, which is the 8-week program. And I'll leave the link for both of those below. And then today's episode of the Temple podcast here, Why I'm Saving My Sex for Union, is a way to create a deeper intimacy and understanding with what inspired me to create Erotic Innocence as a group program to begin with. And so I want to take you back in time a little bit to Holly this time last year in April. I was living in Costa Rica. If you've been following my journey for a while now, you know this. I lived in Costa Rica for almost 5 years. And this time last year, I was in the absolute pinnacle peak orgasm, if you will, of my career as a women's intimacy coach and Tantra teacher. And so I'm still an intimacy coach now, but I've shifted my teachings and the women that I serve quite a bit, which I'll share more about today. But this time last year, I was in my full pinnacle peak, living in the jungle, open relating, fully in my era of liberation, full liberation, sexual liberation, financial liberation, liberation from the system, living in the jungle, right? Like just on a complete ride of freedom. And this time last year was like the orgasm peak of the life that I created in Costa Rica, the beautiful, erotically drenched, devotionally drenched life that I was living in Costa Rica. This time last year, I had two partners, two incredible, powerful, beautiful men that I was deeply, deeply in love with. I was just leading, just coming off of a high season of leading monthly temples in Costa Rica. So I seeded and sprouted a really incredible Tantra temple community down there. So once a month, I would host temples that were all about exploring desire, liberating your turn on, playing in erotic spaces with people, moving through shame and repression, and really inviting people, men and women, to become their full, liberated sexual selves, really unleashing that wild, untamed desire in nature that lives in all of us. So I was in the peak of that. We had a season of back-to-back sold out temples, and I was beginning to host temples even outside of our hometown, being flown places like VIP, vibrating in pleasure, luxury status here of the events that I was hosting every month. And then in between that, I was hosting monthly workshops and immersions, teaching women Tantra and Taoist practices, coaching with women, really stewarding and guiding women into their sexual liberation, helping women to open their relationships and bring more Eros and more partners into this space. So this is where I really was this time last year in Costa Rica, and it was incredible. And everything that I set out to do when I moved to Costa Rica, literally this time last year, was in full bloom, full fruition, right? And then after that, as what happens, right, when we have a dream that we plant and it finally comes into full fruition, the next evolution of who we're becoming starts to present itself. It's like, okay, I've done that. I've checked that box. That dream came to life. That seed came into full fruition. And what's next for me? And I started to have these deep realizations that I was feeling really ready for partnership. I was like, okay, I have gone on this journey of liberation and liberated myself from so many things, liberated myself from armor around my heart, liberated myself from shame, from sexual shame that came from religious conditioning and societal conditioning, right? I liberated myself from deeply seated sexual trauma. I liberated myself from guilt. I liberated myself from, all the things that I could possibly think of. I was fully free. And when I really feel back to it, what brought me onto this path of sexual liberation in the first place was so that I could be free for devotional partnership. I wanted to be able to bring my full, effulgent, dripping, open, devotional woman to my partner, right? And because of the many, many years that I had of trauma and conditioning and shame, as so many of us have, I had to go on this 5-year journey in the jungle to crack my heart open again, to resurrect my womb, to go through all the layers of shame that had been bound in my nervous system. And I was finally free. And so I got to this point in my journey where I'm like, well, what am I free for? What's the point of having this wide open womb if I'm not seeding her with a child, right? In union? What's the point of having this wide open heart in love if I'm not pouring her into a devotional partnership, right? So I realized that my liberation journey was now complete and that I was beginning to bloom into my legacy era, the era of union, of motherhood, of devotion, of bearing children, of planting a garden, of buying a home, right? And so this time last year, I began to really realize all of that. And many other things happened, which I share about in previous podcast episodes. I'm not going to get too into that today, but I had a health crisis last summer. I had a really profound encounter with God. I had many, many things that happened that woke me up to the new desire that was moving through my body, the original desire, which was to become a mother and a wife. And so months before I started to make any lifestyle changes, months before my desire for motherhood and becoming a wife came into my conscious awareness, I remember driving home one day. I was driving on my quad. I had this really fun quad that I would drive through the jungle with, through the rivers and, in the wild, untamed jungle on my bikini, with my bikini, with my dog Luna on my lap. And I was driving through the jungle one day and I was on my way to close the partnership that I had with both of these men because I realized, I'm like, I heard God whisper to me one day, it's time to start making space. It's time to start making space for him. So I could feel, okay, there's something moving here. There's something moving here. And I made the decision to close the partnership that I had with these two men. And I did it on the same day, which was heartbreaking for me. One breakup is hard enough, but two breakups with two incredibly powerful men that I was so deeply in love with, closing our containers on the same day. It was like ripping off both my arms at the same time and shattering my heart into a million pieces. And on my way back that afternoon, I was driving down the shoreline. The sun was setting. I felt so heartbroken and at the same time so free and open in my heart because I knew as the sun was setting and I was driving my quad back home to my tiny house in the jungle, I knew that the sun was setting on the era that I had just completed, this era of liberation, right? I knew the sun was setting and there was heartbreak and grief for that, and grief in my heart for ending the relationship with these two men. But at the same time, as I was driving closer to the horizon where the sun was setting, I could feel the openness and the spaciousness in my heart that was being prepared for this next chapter of legacy. And so I felt both simultaneously heartbroken, but also so hopeful and so excited because I'm like, wow, if that's what I created, looking behind me for the last 5 years in the jungle and all the magic and community and love and beauty and pleasure and bliss and revelation that I created, if that's what I created in the name of love and in the name of liberation, then I can't wait to see what me and God create next in the era of legacy. Right. So I was driving home that day on my quad and I just felt all this excitement moving through my body. And I heard so clearly, so audibly, a whisper from God. And he said, Holly, the next man that you have sex with will be your husband. The next man that you have sex with will be your husband. And I remember receiving that, and I think I was already having such a wild drive on that sunset drive that day. But I remember hearing those words, Holly, the next man that you have sex with will be your husband. And I remember rejecting actually those words to begin with because I thought, okay. I know I'm leaving my liberation era and I know my legacy era is next, but surely there's many experiences that I'm going to have between now and then, right? Like, I don't know if I'm really actually quite ready to be done with my liberation era. All this doubt and like contraction started moving through my body when I heard those words. Holly, the next man you have sex with will be your husband. And also realizing too here, ladies, that even the word husband, hearing that word husband is not a word that I had uttered for many years. It had not come off my tongue. It had not been a desire. It had not been something that I had wanted or even identified with, because that would mean having a husband would make me a wife. And although I could feel the place of desire in my womb that wanted that so deeply, I could feel all the layers of fear and contraction and doubt that moved through my body on that quad ride home when I felt the word husband and I felt the identity of wife. I thought, that's making me feel all sorts of feelings. So here I was driving on the quad ride home, heartbroken, hopeful, and also curious around this message from God. But if there's one thing I know on my many years of this journey, it's the voice of God. And if there's one thing I obey on this journey, it's the voice of God. And I am very obedient. I always have been, right? Listening to the voice of God and hearing his commands and his instructions for me has been something I've been really good at my whole life. And so when I heard that word, I could feel, okay, it's bringing up all sorts of feelings now. It's making me feel all sorts of ways, but this is it. This is the first seeding that I'm receiving from him now that I have all this space. After ending these two relationships and opening my heart deeper, this is the first seeding of my next step in destiny. So I received it. I received that seed and I said, okay, God, the next man that I have sex with will be my husband. And I know receiving that seed from you is going to take me on a ride. I know it because where I am, being a temple priestess and a Tantra teacher in Costa Rica, living in the jungle, surrounding myself with nobody that's married or has children, to where now you're calling me to go, which is to reserve my sex for my husband. I'm like, ooh, there's a big gap between where I am and where you want me to be. But I'm here for it. I'm here for it. The same way you told me in 2020 to close the doors of my business and move to the jungle, that made me feel all sorts of ways. But I did it. And look what happened. So I was like, okay, God, the next man that I have sex with will be my husband. And I heard those words almost precisely a year ago. It was early May, maybe the end of April, 2024. And so here we are. A year later, I'm living in Austin. So I've left the jungle. I've moved back home to the US because that day when I received that voice of God, that word from God, that the next man that I have sex with will be my husband, everything in my life began to change. How couldn't it? How couldn't it? So little by little, I began to transform. I left my career as a temple priestess, which was very hard for me because my whole identity, my whole livelihood, how I met clients, I wasn't even on social media at this point. I just joined social media a few months ago. My whole ecosystem of how I met clients and how I met people and how I connected with the culture was through my events, was through hosting temple nights and teaching Tantra classes at yoga studios and retreats in Costa Rica. And so I had to make the decision to leave the temple culture because I knew that I was being called into a new style of relating, of monogamy, of devotional partnership, of marriage, and that the first thing that had to go was this path of temple priestess, right? And so, of course, in my heart and in my teachings, I'm still a temple priestess, right? I'm still deeply, deeply drenched in the path of feminine artistry and erotic artistry. But I don't teach these tools now in public to co-ed audiences, right? I teach these in very small online containers with my one-on-one mentorship clients, women. And so that was the first thing I did. I left the temple Tantra community and I began to unwind and unravel all the connections that I had in my life with men that were leaky, that were, built on flirtation and eros, that were really polarized in our erotic attraction for each other. I began to unwind relationships with men that I had deep feelings for, even if we weren't in any sort of like romantic relationship, but men that I felt, oh, right, this is somebody I had to get really honest with myself and do a lot of inventory in my heart with where am I running wounded eros with men in my life, and where can I restore my organic eros so that it's actually supporting my desire that God has given me for marriage, for partnership. So that was really where I started, was untying and unwinding all the ways that my Eros was moving through life with a seeking energy, with a leaky energy, with a need for validation or approval, because I knew that preparing myself for partnership, this was part of the process. Because I couldn't, it doesn't work like we don't attract a partner who wants to be with us in a monogamous relationship and then we change our ways. It's the changing of our ways that attracts a marriage-minded man. It's the changing of our ways that attracts someone to us that wants the same things, that's value aligned. So I knew that within my own embodiment, to move from a path of open relating and liberation into a path of legacy and devotion and marriage, that I had to change my value system. I had to now begin to value legacy and devotion more than I valued freedom and my own experience. I had to value the we more than I valued just the me, right? I had to really start to embody a different identity. And this is what I call the identity of walking as she who is chosen. I teach about this so much in my private spaces with clients. What does it actually mean to walk as she who is chosen? Meaning to walk as a woman who is already in devotion to and faithful to him, her beloved, before she even meets him, right? To begin to clear the field of connections that will be distractions, to begin to create a leakless union within your own system so that you're not leaking erotic energy and attracting men that just want to siphon that or just want to feed off of that, right? To walk as she who has chosen is to begin to live in devotion to him and to be faithful to our union now. So if I were to ask you, what would change in your life? What would need to change in your life if you were to walk as she who is chosen? If you right now were already in the union that you say you want, the union that you desire, the type of union where 1 + 1 = infinity, that type of union, if you were in that now and you were to take a look around your life, what would need to change? And I can guarantee you the answer is everything. Everything would need to change The way that you interact with men would change. The type of people that you date, the type of men you're even willing to entertain in dating would change, right? The way that you walk into a room would change. The way you hold yourself and your value and your worth as a woman, as she who is chosen versus she who is seeking, she who needs validation, right? She who is willing to exchange her most precious resources of love and sex and devotion, she who is willing to exchange that for approval or validation. No, she who is chosen walks into a room fully whole and complete in her union with God and herself. And from there, she attracts potent, claiming men, right? So if you were to walk as she who is already chosen, what would change? This is what I began doing this time last year. I began to walk as she who is already chosen, and everything started to change. Now, what I will say here is it took me months to go through this change because I actually didn't have support in this very specific transition of going from like lover, priestess, temple, erotic, liberated woman into the identity of wife and devotional partnership, right? This is a big transition, and I didn't know anybody in my life that had made this transition, right? So it took me months. It took me months of trial and error of thinking, well, I can prepare myself for union, but I can still have this relationship. Or, well, I can prepare myself for union, but I can still teach this, right? And one by one, God began to show me like, no, you can't. No, you can't. You've got to make space. You've got to change yourself at a core level of identity. You've got to change who you be, what you believe, what you value. Right? It is a huge initiation to go from liberation to legacy. And this is the traditional, tunnel that we traverse as women from maiden into mother. But mine was a specific flavor of that tunnel because I was specifically in the world of erotic artistry and open relating. So to transverse that tunnel into mother was an especially long and wide journey. Right. And it's a journey that I've been going through and undergoing and unwinding and unfurling into this whole last year. And just like every part of my journey, there's moments where I'm like, I wish I had a teacher. I wish I had a mentor. I wish I had a woman who's walked this very path that she could just give me a handbook and be like, here's how to do it, Holly. But I didn't. And I know I didn't because part of my anointing here as a woman's mentor is to help guide you through this initiation, right? So every big initiation that I've been on as a woman, I didn't have mentors for so that I could become a mentor in that specific part. Right. So, what has taken me a year to go from liberation into legacy, from going from having lovers to building a legacy, right? From recreational dating into kingdom courting and claiming, right? To walk this world as she who is chosen. All these transformations I've been through over this last year, this is what I've created my whole body of work around now. And this is what Erotic Innocence, my 8-week group program that launches next week, this is what it's all about. It's about restoring your organic Eros. So what I was saying before about we have wounded Eros that moves transactionally and wants to receive validation and then is looking for approval and it's seeking, right? We have wounded Eros. And then we have our organic Eros, which is serving life, serving creation, right? It's a potent frequency. So the program, this is one of the pillars, is it helps you untie your wounded Eros from your organic Eros so that you can return to your God-given design as a woman. And if you are a devotional woman, which if you are listening to this podcast, you are. If you're a devotional woman, then your God-given anointing as a woman is to be a mother and a bride. is to be a mother and a bride in union, is to birth heaven on earth, right? And that is going to require you to mature and bloom into a whole new way of being. It's going to require that you have a really restored, organic, erotic current moving through your body, right? So that's the first pillar of this program. And the second pillar of this program is erotic wealth, teaching you and guiding you into how to cultivate and contain your most precious feminine resources, which move through your Eros. This looks like your joy, your delight, your pleasure, your devotion, your love, your nourishment, right? These are all the parts and pieces of your femininity that you get to bring to your union as an offering to him. And because I am working with women that have already been through the liberation era, that have been the pleasure priestesses and done the Tantra courses and liberated their life force energy, that's a very erotically drenched woman, right? You're already free in your Eros. But what I want to teach you how to do is to not just be free in your Eros, but to be wealthy in your Eros. Because we all know if we were to compare our Eros as a currency to money, for example, you could make tons of money. You could be very liberated in your revenue streams, but that does not mean that you are wealthy. That does not mean that you are resourced, because just because it's liberated and moving in doesn't mean that it's being held, contained, and invested. So the second pillar of the Erotic Innocence program is teaching you erotic wealth, teaching you how to take all that liberated energy and Eros in your body and reserve it for him. The same way, if you had a dream in your heart to buy a house, you would save for that. You would generate revenue and save it and let it gain interest and invest it in the promise, in the dream of buying a house. This is the same for our Eros as women. This is why I am saving my sex for him. And there is in no way that I am dry or brittle or cut off from the pulse of my Eros in that process. In fact, I feel more wealthy in my Eros now that I'm not having sex, now that I'm not leaking my Eros left, right, and center, now that I'm not having multiple partners and spending my Eros on so many people, now that I'm invested in the devotional partnership that is on its way, I am wealthy in my Eros and I feel good. I feel healthy. I feel vibrant. I feel magnetic, right? This is what I want to teach you. And then the third pillar in my Erotic Innocence program is magnetic to marriage-minded men. So being magnetic to marriage-minded men. So again, I know you listening. You're already magnetic. You're already magnetic. But I want to teach you how to be magnetic to marriage-minded men. Because here's the thing, ladies. Any woman can inspire a man's desire, but only one will inspire his claim. So as magnetic as you are, as drenched in desire and beauty as you are, is that desire and beauty and Eros actually magnetizing the type of men that are committed and claiming of you? If it's not, then this is where we bring it back to the first pillar. You're likely running your Eros through wounded channels of pick me, right? Do you like me now, right? Validation seeking. Instead of moving your Eros through the organic current in your body, which is then going to attract powerful and committed men instead. So we want you to just not be magnetic. We want you to be magnetic to your desire, right? To the deepest desire. And if your deepest desire is to experience and birth and cultivate a union that, like I always say, is 1 + 1 = infinity. So I'm not talking about like just a regular old marriage here. I'm not talking about just like a regular old partnership. No, the type of union I'm talking about that I know you want is a union that's drenched in Eros and led by God. It's anointed. It's an anointed union. It's an anointed union where you and him are here to birth a legacy. You and him are here to birth heaven on earth, to create a new reality of what's possible in relationships on this planet, right? It's a big calling. It's counterculture. And this is why I'm doing the work that I do, because there's not a lot of people that are teaching you how to do this. Right? So I want you to be magnetic to marriage-minded men, to begin to come out of hiding and allow yourself to be dated and courted while reserving your sex for union. How do I know how to do this, ladies? Because I've been doing this for the last year, and every single part of my life has transformed. Every single part. I live in a new country. My mission has shifted. I'm saving my sex for marriage. If you had told me this time last year, before that quad ride, sunset quad ride, where I received that revelation from God, if you had told me a year ago that this time next year I would be living in Austin, I would be going back to a church community and finding such deep devotion there, that I would be saving my sex for marriage, that I would feel the most alive I've ever felt, the most at peace I've ever felt. And a big part of feeling that way is because of my union with God and reserving my sex for marriage. I would have laughed. I would have laughed at you. I would have been like, yeah, maybe you're talking about my twin, maybe, but not me, right? So the changes that I've made over this last year is what is informing all these programs and classes that I'm teaching, ladies, because I want you to have these gifts. I want you to reclaim your value and your worth as a woman. I want you to remember that the most precious resource that you have is your Eros, right? I want you to have a life that is so resourced, so radiantly resourced in your truth, in your love, and in your pleasure, while reserving yourself for him, right? I want you to have it all. And that's really what this program is all about. So if you're curious to learn more, our doors close at the end of this week. And I will be offering some free 30-minute calls this week. If there's space on my schedule and your schedule to meet, if there's any other questions that you have, I'll leave a link below so you can book a pleasured and purified call with me. This is a complimentary call. We can just meet each other. You can ask a couple more questions about the program. But otherwise, the program doors close at the end of this week on Friday, the 11th, and we begin in a few days after that. So if you're feeling the call, if you want to take this journey, if you want to restore your organic Eros, if you want to become wealthy in your Eros and have rich soils for the man that you're meant to be with in union, and if you want to start magnetizing marriage-minded men, not just any man, but marriage-minded men, then this program is for you. So I hope that everything that I shared with you today on my journey is inspiring to you. And I hope that my wish is for you to, if you haven't already made this decision to reserve your sex for union while dating, my hope and prayer is that there's curiosity inside of you of like, well, what might that be like? What might that feel like? What might be better in my life if I do that? Because I can tell you from experience, so much of my life has changed because of that single decision. I realized the heartbreaking process of having to untie myself spiritually, emotionally, sexually, and physically from a man that I was in sexual union with. That process of breaking up and breaking down. I don't ever want to do that again. I want to plant my seeds in soils that will last a lifetime and beyond. So the relief and peace that I feel in my body, knowing that the next man that I open my womb and devotional heart to will be the man that I walk the rest of my life with, The feeling that I experience in my body is profound. And I'm curious for you, if you were to feel into that for yourself, that you would never have another breakup again, that you would never have to start all over again, energetically, financially, spiritually, right? That you could actually be with the man that God has chosen for you in union. And that in fact, your erotic wealth that you're cultivating for him is the most precious gift that you can give him. If you were to walk now as she who is chosen, already faithful and already in devotion to him, what would change for you? What would you need to change? Right? These are the questions I want to leave you with today. So this is my statement, and I say that the sexual liberation era is over, and now the erotically wealthy era is here. Erotically wealthy for union, erotically wealthy for children, erotically wealthy to birth God's kingdom of heaven on earth. So if you want to join me in this journey in any way, I invite you to come closer. Let me meet you. Let me feel you. Send me a DM on Instagram and let me know what's stirring in you. Are you feeling called to reserve your sex for union, right? Does that trigger you? I love hearing from you when I record these episodes because it allows me to feel the intimacy of what we're co-creating together. So send me a DM and I'll leave all the links below. I'll leave a link for booking a complimentary call with me. I will leave a link for some free resources. So I have two master classes. I have the Erotic Wealth Masterclass, which is this week, and I have the Organic Eros Masterclass, which has already happened, but you can register below to receive the replays. And I will also leave the link below for the Erotic Innocence 8-week group program that launches soon. So thank you for being here with me on the Temple podcast. I love you so much, and I can't wait to meet you deeper.